All right, everyone, we are going to go ahead and start our Persian War visual notes. You should have already read or listened to the chapter on the Persian Wars. Now you're going to get some additional information. This is typically how I teach this chapter. We normally don't read it in class because we're going to get a lot of extra information that is not in the textbook. So please make sure you are going to watch the whole video. You can take notes. I'm going to try to highlight facts that are not in the textbook to make sure that you include these in your notes because they will be especially helpful for you in the war letter writing for the mini project. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the fact that we don't need to memorize dates. We know that, but it's always good just to put it into reference. So we need to know that the Persian Wars are going to start in the year 499 BCE, and they're going to go, most historians agree, to about 479 BCE. However, there are some people that state they might have actually gone as long as 449 BCE. It's not always easy to necessarily say when a 20-plus year war begins and ends. So there's a little bit of a debate on that end time, but we're going to use the end date of 479 matching our textbook. Now, the Persian Wars are going to start with the Ionian Revolt. The Ionian Revolt is going to take place in 499 BCE, and essentially it is that Greek colony of Ionia, and Persia knocks on their door. Athens comes to help. Athens leaves, Persia gets mad, and then they decide, wait a second, mainland Greece is going to be the next target in our conquest. So 499, start of the Persian-Greek wars, and it all began with the Ionian Revolt. Now, let's go back to Persia, and we need to know that Persia actually starts out in what we refer to as modern-day Iran, and it really just started out as a small tribe. However, what allowed them to be such a successful conquering group of people is their use of arrows. They were able to kill their enemies from really far away, and when we're talking hand-to-hand combat, this is going to be a major advantage for them. So we will see the arrows coming back into play when they go ahead and go to battle against the Greeks, but this is definitely something that they're known for specializing in. This does allow them to conquer many of their neighbors, including Mesopotamia, Asia Minor, Syria, Egypt, India, and many parts of Europe in the ancient world. Now, they are known as the largest empire at the time. Okay, and the reason why is because they've got about 50 million people in their empire at the year 480 BCE. And you're like, okay, well, 50 million, I can't really put that into reference, but what you need to know is that is about 44% of the Earth's population at that time. You're thinking, well, there's no way that's possible. I'm not saying that the Persian Empire took over 44% of the land of the earth, but they do have 44% of the world's population during that time. Now, if you think about it, most people are hanging out in the parts of the world that we have been learning about in ancient history. And as their empire continues to grow, it's easier to understand that they could have easily had 44% of the world's population because of where they were located on the planet, and that's where most of the people were hanging out in the ancient world. Now, we know that Athens and Sparta are not always going to be the best buds. However, they are going to have to come together to defeat Persia, because they are going to be an extremely large force to be reckoned with. So, Sparta and Athens are going to become allies at this time. We define allies are essentially just groups, states, governments, whatever it may be, that agree to help with a common enemy. Now, there is a story, a legend, that essentially Persia is going to send a messenger. Okay, so there's going to be a messenger that's going to go to Athens after the Ionian Revolt. And the messenger is essentially going to ask for 2 gifts. Okay, and those 2 gifts are going to be of earth and water. And essentially, if the Athenians would have given a clump of dirt and some water for the Persian messenger to take back to his king, then you would be essentially saying, we are going to be a part of the Persian Empire. Now, the legend goes that the Greeks stated, well, if you want Greek earth and water, go and get it yourselves. And then they threw the messengers into a giant pit. As you can assume, this is going to make King Darius pretty mad. Obviously, they don't kill all of the messengers or there would have been no legend. They're going to let one of them live to go back to King Darius and essentially say that the Greeks have not agreed to be a part of our empire. And this is going to be the next step of the Persian Wars. Okay, now let's go down here to King Darius. And he is the first Persian king that we're going to focus on. He's the first one that comes in contact with the Greeks. And he is going to have a very large empire that he's going to divide into 20 provinces, just like those states or groups, territories that we've been talking about. And he's going to collect a lot of taxes to make sure that he can run such a large empire. But he is known for ruling with some kindness because he does let people keep their own customs and their own religious beliefs. So he's creating an empire with lots of different people, lots of different ethnicities, all sorts of languages being spoken, religious beliefs. So this is how he's going to try to make sure that the people that he is conquering, they're still going to want to be on his side and be a part of the Persian Empire. Okay, so King Darius, even though he's fine, he's ruling with some kindness, he does not like being told no. Okay, so when the Greeks tell him no, he gets pretty upset about that. And that's going to actually lead to the first battle. Okay, so King Darius is going to bring the Persian troops to a location of Marathon. Now, what we need to know is the Battle of Marathon is going to be versus Persia and Athens. And we need to know that this battle is happening in the year 490 BCE. Actually going to be just a one-day battle. Now, this is going to be a story that does show up in the textbook of this messenger, and the messenger's name is Pheidippides. Have used foot runners to actually relay messages. It was their fastest mode of operation, which is kind of crazy. So they would have these messengers run through the mountainsides to essentially get a message to and from people. Now, Pheidippides has been sent with the task to essentially have Sparta come and help the Athenians at the Battle of Marathon. They know that the Persians are coming. They know that they threw some men in some wells, and King Darius is not going to be okay with that. So the messenger Pheidippides is going to run for 2 days straight to get to Sparta. And when he gets to Sparta, Sparta says no. Okay, there is a full moon that they are waiting for. They're in the middle of a religious festival. No, that's not a chocolate chip cookie. That is meant to be a moon. Here, I'll color it in yellow. Oh, look at that. Now it just looks like a strawberry lemon cookie. But Sparta says no because they're in the middle of a religious ceremony and they have to wait for that full moon. So then Pheidippides has to run back to Athens and pretty much say, bad news, you guys, we're in this on our own. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and include an image that shows the battle strategy for Marathon. Essentially, what you need to know is they're on a beach, and they know that the Persians are going to be coming on their ships, and the Athenians are on the beach, and the Persians are on their boats. And what the great military general of Miltiades does is he realizes that he can essentially wait until the Persians start to try to come onto the beach. He can surround their soldiers on the beach and force them back to their boats. So we need to know that Miltiades is kind of the mastermind behind this particular strategy, and he is able to have the Greeks surround the Persians, and the Greeks run the Persians right back to their ships, and that's why this battle is done in a single day. The victory does go to Athens, so that's good to know. And it's also good to know that we have a specific date that will be important for your war letter if you're choosing to use the Battle of Marathon. It is a one-day battle. I do not have a time period for you. So as for month and day, you are welcome to make up what particular month or day, again, if you're choosing the Battle of Marathon for your war letter. Now, sometimes students like to know kind of the losses. It's always interesting to see how many people were lost in these battles. For Persia, they lose 6,400 men trying to get on the beach of Marathon, and the Athenians are only going to lose 192 men. Okay, so that's a major difference in the death tolls. This is what we call that home court advantage. Essentially, it is harder to try to get onto land that is already being protected by the people who live there. And that's really the downside for the Persian soldiers there. So victory goes to the Athenians at the Battle of Marathon. One thing that we should mention after the victory at Marathon, our famous Pheidippides is called upon once again to return to Athens to declare their victory. He runs the 26.2 miles from the Battle of Marathon to the city of Athens, where he announces their victory and then sadly drops dead. So that is why we call marathons marathons, and that is also why we have a 26.2-mile marathon. So just a little fun fact there. And yeah, poor Pheidippides. Sorry. After the Athenian victory at Marathon, there is a little bit of a pause in our story. King Darius actually is going to die after that particular battle, had nothing to do with it. King Darius was 64 when he died. We don't know how exactly he died. We know he had been really sick for about 30 days and did not make it out of that illness. So King Darius dies at age 64, and his son is going to become the next Persian king, King Xerxes. And when he comes to power, he is going to continue his attacks on the Greeks. He is going to pretty much pick up where his dad left off, realize that it is not over, and it's going to take a little bit of time to get there. He's going to go ahead and start his attacks in the year 480 BCE. And that's going to bring us to one of the more famous battles of the Persian Wars, which is the Battle of Thermopylae, or also known as the Last Stand of 300. So this is where we're going to have Persia, and they are now going to be fighting against both a combined force of Athens and Sparta. And as I had mentioned in the textbook reading, the Athenians are really known for their navy. They are a port city state, meaning they're already known for having lots of boats coming in and out for trading reasons. So they're also able to use these boats in their navy for battle times. Sparta is known for their trained soldiers, so they are going to be known for their army. Now, King Xerxes has to get a lot of soldiers, in fact, 180,000 soldiers, to Greece to start this battle. And he is going to find a narrow channelway known as the Hellespont, and he is going to get his men across this narrow channel. Now, how he chooses to do that is pretty legendary. He is going to essentially tie a bunch of boats together, and he is going to then have his men march across a boat bridge, which really did happen. He was able to get 180,000 soldiers over this boat bridge, and he makes himself known and present in Greece. Now, they are going to know that the Persians are coming back, and we are going to see King Leonidas take charge of the particular battle strategy. Now, King Leonidas is the Spartan king at this time, and as we know, the Spartans are an oligarchy. They do have more than one person in charge, but they also called their leader a king, so it kind of feels like a monarchy, but because there would have been two kings in charge at one time, that's what also kind of constitutes it as an oligarchy, just so you know. We do need to know that we are looking at the Battle of Thermopylae happening 10 whole years after the Battle of Marathon, just to kind of put that into perspective. Everything we're talking about happens in 3 days, and it does also happen in August. We don't have a particular date, but when you go, if you choose to pick the Battle of Thermopylae for your war letter, we do have a year, which is 480 BCE. We do also have the month, which is August, and we know that it happens for 3 days. Okay, so those are kind of your important features to make sure you're including if you do choose to write your war letter for the Battle of Thermopylae. Now, we know that the Persians are coming with 180,000 soldiers, and there is going to be a stand of 6,000 Greeks versus Persia. So anyone can probably imagine that 6,000 soldiers versus 180,000 soldiers, not very good odds, but King Leonidas is pretty smart, and he realizes that there is a really narrow passageway that he's going to lead the Persian troops through. Okay, on one side you're going to have ocean, on the other side it's going to be a pretty steep mountainside, which is essentially going to mean that as the Persian 180,000 soldiers come to greet the Greek soldiers, there's really only going to be a few hundred at a time that are going to be able to fight a few hundred Greeks at a time. So that's going to be a really strong strategy because they're going to be able to hold off, because the Greeks are good fighters, especially the Spartans. Many of the Persian soldiers are not going to have as much passion and skill because they were kind of swept up into the Persian Empire. Many of them were farmers, many of them were other craftsmen, not necessarily training since birth to be soldiers like the Spartan army had been. So even though the Persians had numbers in their favor, King Leonidas, master strategist, if we have to fight, we must fight in a narrow channel way so we can essentially make sure we're just fighting a few hundred versus a few hundred. Now, they are able to hold off the Persian soldiers until there's a traitor. The traitor's name is Ephialtes, and that actually now means nightmare in Greek, because he is a traitor that essentially showed the Persians how to kind of circle back, go through the mountains so that they could essentially surround the Greek soldiers in this narrow little passageway. Now, Leonidas is going to see that his troops are, that there's been a traitor, because all of a sudden the Persians are going to start circling back and they're leaving. He realizes that they have found the secret passageway and that they're going to be circling around. He is going to allow only 300 Spartans to stay and fight, because he knows that it's going to be essentially a battle to the end. And if you were a Spartan soldier that did not already have a son back home that would be able to take your place as a soldier in the army, he would send you back. So he only kept 300 men that wanted to stay. All of the Spartan soldiers would have wanted to stay and die in battle because it was one of the only honorable deaths you could have as a Spartan soldier. The only other honorable death for a Spartan would have been to die in childbirth, because if you died in childbirth, you were essentially dying in sacrifice for your Spartan city-state. So dying in battle, dying in childbirth were the only two honorable deaths as a Spartan citizen. Just kind of an interesting note on that one. So the total number that stayed behind is actually 1,400 Greeks. We focus so much on the 300 Spartans that many times people think that there were only 300 Greeks that were there at this last stand, but it's really 300 Spartans, but a total of 1,400 Greeks that are going to stay. Now, they are staying just as a way to slow down the Persian forces. They know that Persia is going to win. They're trying to give the Athenians time to essentially exit the city-state before Persia comes and knocks on their door. So they stay, they fight to the death, including King Leonidas, and this is going to be a major act of bravery that's going to really inspire the Greek troops to keep fighting. So it is going to be a victory for Persia. And the death tolls are going to be pretty interesting. Even though Persia is victorious in this particular battle, they're going to lose 20,000 soldiers. Okay. And that's going to be compared to the 2,000 Greeks. Claim victory because they do essentially make the passageway through Thermopylae and they're able to continue on to Athens. Their death tolls are much, much higher than the Greek death tolls, but they claim the land, they get through the passageway. So again, this is a victory for Persia. And that's going to move us on to our next major battle. Okay. And before we get to that, there is going to be panic. Okay, so the Athenians are going to get word that the Persians are going to be making through the passageway, and Athens is going to burn to the ground completely in 2 weeks. Okay, so in 2 weeks' time, there will be nothing left of Athens, and that is really because King Xerxes has come and burned it to the ground with his men. Okay. That brings us to the Battle of Salamis. Okay, so this happens after Athens has been burned to the ground. Salamis is going to happen in 480 BCE in the month of September, and it's going to be a one-day battle. Okay, and this actually happens on September 29th. We have the date. So if you are going to be choosing to write your war letter from the perspective of the Battle of Salamis, it is happening in 480 BCE, which is the same exact year as the Battle of Thermopylae. It is just a month later in September, and we do have a date, September 29th, and it is all going to happen on that one day. Okay, it is a battle between Persia and the Athenians. Now, the reason why it's really just Persia versus Athens here is this is going to be a naval battle. And as we know, Sparta is not known for battling on sea. And so they are going to kind of be not a huge part of this. It's really going to be the Athenian Navy. What you need to know is that Salamis is going to be taking place in a narrow channel. There is going to be kind of a mastermind behind this, which is Themistocles. So Themistocles realizes that there is a way that they can possibly win the Persians at this particular battle. They're still highly outnumbered, so they have to again get themselves into a small channel. And they're going to have a messenger that is essentially going to say that Themistocles is going to be, giving up, and he's going to be joining the Persians, and he realizes that this is all going, not in their favor, and he's going to essentially trick them. But that whole surrendering is really just trapping and tricking and surrounding the Persian ships. Something else that's interesting is that the Persians are not always going to be the best swimmers. Many of their soldiers are going to be from landlocked territories. And I know for those of us here in California, it's hard to remember that some people don't swim, especially in the ancient world, unless you were living right by a body of water that was not dangerous to swim in. Remember, they're living a lot of times by strong rivers and things like that. Many ancient people wouldn't have known how to swim. So even if you weren't too far off from the coast, as these ships were sinking for the Persians, many of them were also going to be drowning with their ships going down. So we have got about 300 ships sinking for the Persians and only 40 ships for the Greeks. Many of the Persian soldiers are going to drown as their ships are going down, which is going to increase the death tolls here. Lots of mixed messages on how many numbers. Could have been anywhere from 300 Greeks that had died in this battle. Don't have a number for the Persians, but anywhere from 600 to 800 men is a number that I have found. Again, lots of mixed messages on how many people actually died. So we can go ahead and claim that Athens is going to be victorious because of their strategy, trapping, tricking, sending mixed messages, and it's going to work. So Xerxes is going to flee. he realizes that he won in the battle in August at the Battle of Thermopylae, but he's lost again. He's been tricked. So he wants to kind of retreat and regroup his men. So he makes his way to the Hellespont. But what he realizes is that his ships have actually been destroyed. And it wasn't by the Greeks, it was just by bad weather. And when you tie a bunch of boats together and then you create a giant bridge across a passageway, there's going to be chances that some waves and wind and storms are going to cause you some problems. So he is now kind of stuck. He can't get his men out the way he was hoping to. And it is going to lead to a little bit of a regrouping. And our last major battle that we're going to focus on is the Battle of Plataea. That is going to happen in the year 479 BCE. This is going to be a 13-day battle, and it's going to happen in the spring. We don't have an exact date or month, but again, if you're going to pick the Battle of Plataea, it is a 13-day battle, and it happens in the spring of 479 BCE. It is going to be led by the Spartans, along with the Athenians. But what's different about this last battle is they are realizing they actually have a chance to win against the Persians at this point, as long as everybody comes together. So this isn't just 2 city-states, it's going to be really hundreds of city-states that come together, and 80,000 Greeks are going to unite at this particular battle, and they are going to preserve their independence. So this is going to be the end of the Persian Wars. Greece is able to keep their homeland at this point. The Persian Empire does not end, right? They're not killing the Persian Empire. They're just stopping them from conquering their land. And it's really the stopping the spread of conquering most of Europe at this time. I'm also going to include a slide that kind of shows some of the after effects of the war. That I usually have with the visual notes, that just kind of shows again what happened after the war, and just the biggest reminder is the Greeks did not end the Persian Empire, but they do end their conquest after the Battle of Plataea. All right, you guys, I hope you got a little bit extra information out of those visual notes, and make sure you're using those dates and months and the information from here, as well as the textbook to help you write your Persian War letter. And thanks so much for listening. Bye.